you noticed a tweet from Sua Cravens that really pricked your antenna, and obviously, so like we're not creating this. Sua Cravens did, and he attaches some meaning to that, and also they're like it's not just a callback to the past, but it's also a comparison with the present. Take it away, Ethan.
So it's this tweet from Sua Cravens. He posted it earlier today. He said, woke up wondering what could have been had Pat Hayden kept his word and hired Coach O after that 2013 season. We cried like babies before the bowl game when he told us he wasn't coming back. We were all in on Ed O. I still remember after we finished camp my freshman year, he had a Cajun food truck pull up to practice and serve fried catfish and shrimp po' boys with a side of seafood gumbo and had our nutritionist furious. He kind of continues on that. And then he says, but I'm getting similar vibes from this current USC team, staff, and recruiting class. You can feel the energy and swag coming back to campus. New strength and conditioning coach setting a physical standard. New front office personnel making moves all offseason long. The California recruiting fence is alive and well. The Trojans are set up with a chance to do double-digit wins the next 2 seasons and make their first ever playoff appearance. I cannot wait to see it all unfold. So obviously a lot to unpack here, Matt. Some notes, both positive and negative, both about USC's past and USC's future. I know it stood out to me. I'm just curious, first and foremost, though, what stands out to you most about this tweet here?
It is an interesting time to make the Coach O callback, and I think there are lots of layers to this, as you yourself alluded to. I think one of the things is that USC administratively has things lined up properly, and one thing we can definitely say is that under Pat Hayden, things were not lined up properly. So I think that's the especially good point. In terms of litigating Coach O, that's a different deal. Because Ed Orgeron, obviously he has a national championship, and so just for that reality, he greatly exceeded everyone's expectations at LSU. But Joe Burrow kind of fell into his lap. This was before NIL and the portal had the dynamics that they do today. Coach O was fortunate in that regard. Now he didn't screw it up, to his credit, but still, Joe, you get Joe Burrow, that is it's not as though Coach O engineered that, but nevertheless, he did win a national title. So, to me, looking at Ed Orgeron before and after Burrow, that was a real mess at LSU, and it does lead me to wonder how well everything would have worked out at USC. And of course, the other thing we have to say is that I wasn't necessarily firmly pro Coach O or firmly anti. My deal back then, not that anyone was paying attention to anything I said. I was still writing for College Football News back in 2013. But my sense was, okay, if it's not Ed Orgeron, what's the alternative? I think that was the relative, the appropriate question to ask then, and it's still the appropriate question to ask now. And so, coming up with Steve Sarkisian, at a time when he had not really mastered the finer arts of coaching. When Sark was hired, I thought, oh no, this is not good. And it didn't turn out to be good. Now, of course, why it didn't turn out to be good was not necessarily a football thing, right? Because Steve Sarkisian's problem back then was not football. It was a bottle, and, his bout with alcoholism. But nevertheless, Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian were both hired as USC head coaches before they had proven themselves as head coaches. And we've seen both Sark and Kiffin get better after, going to the Nick Saban rehab facility in Tuscaloosa. And Kiffin in particular, he needed a group of 5 jobs, such as what he had at Florida Atlantic, to just spend your time in the salt mines. You learn how to be a head coach without the withering pressure. That should have been the progression, and then after Sark and Kiffin both went through those progressions, then you hire them as head coach. A lot of Los Angeles sports fans will remember the brief and ill-fated tenure of Luke Walton as Laker head coach. Luke Walton has some talent as a basketball coach, but like, you don't take over the Lakers at the very beginning. Not unless you're like a Brad Stevens prodigy who, again, has already proven something as a head coach. If you're a young coach, you need to be proven. All right, that's the thing. Like, you don't have to take the Laker job in your 30s, right? Spend some years at the lower level. Be the coach of the Hornets, be the coach of a mid-level team like the Atlanta Hawks or something. Spend your time in the salt mines, learn how to be a coach in the league, gather information, and then, when you turn like 48 or 50 or 52, then there might be the opening to be the coach of the Lakers, and you will be ready for the job in all of its dimensions, in all of its details. So the comparison's obvious, right? Sark and Kiffin both, when they were both brought aboard at USC in the early 2010s, they weren't ready. And so, if that's the comparison we make, yes, Ed Orgeron would have been better. He would have been better than Sark and Kiffin at that point in time. But of course, why are you limiting your options? And of course, and let me just pop this up from Logan Dowell here, Pat Hayden could have hired Chris Peterson. Now, Chris Peterson seems to have been pretty consistent and pretty adamant about saying, I don't want to coach in the big lights. I don't want to coach in a huge media market where the scrutiny is withering. But to be absolutely fair to Logan here, USC could have made a bigger full court press, could have tried to convince Peterson, could have made a bigger, tougher run at him. For sure, the Trojans could have done that instead of what they plainly and obviously did. They settled. They wanted to keep someone in the family. I saw that Sua Cravens, in like the replies to his tweet, people were saying, why didn't Coach O get hired? And Sua Cravens just very simply said, politics. So like, that was the mess that was going on at USC. But I think, before people get into that, just that binary, well, should it have been Coach O or should it not have been Coach O? Reasonable question, but it really kind of misses the bigger picture, which was that, the weighing of alternatives and the other decisions USC made in the Pat Hayden era, like, USC did not consider its options. USC did not go for a proven guy first. Like, if USC went for a rock star and couldn't land the plane, couldn't nail the rock star hire, and Orgeron was like a third or a fourth choice, keeping in mind that Pete Carroll was Mike Garrett's fourth choice in the year 2000, that would hit different, right? If Ed Orgeron was the coach, but he was like a fourth choice, then you say, okay, like, the process was still sound. But USC's process, I think 100% of us can agree, USC's process was not sound. And so that's certainly something to point out for Sua Craven's tweet. Ethan?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things you said, Matt. I think the process is obviously the thing that's the mess here. You made a good point about how you can't really have confidence in Coach O at that point in time. I mean, we can sit here in 2025 and our hindsight is that he won a national championship. So our mindset now is a lot different than it was back in the day, when Sua Cravens was in a USC uniform instead of commentating sideline at USC football games now, like he does now. But I just think that if we're, relitigating the past a little bit, the bigger mess is, with some of the false promises that were made to the players. I think it doesn't really work very well building trust with the players if you kind of promise them that this well-liked coach is coming back and then he doesn't end up coming back. It's probably something that had a lot less consequences back in the day, but I can't even imagine if you did that in the current era with NIL and how easy it is to transfer. Like, if you told a group of players that you were trying to keep around that their coach was staying and then their coach didn't stay, like, it would just be a mass exodus and it would be not a good look for the university at all. So that kind of stuff. You mentioned the politics reply in the comments, all kind of